All right, we want to bring back in Chris Purdy, who we talked with earlier in the hour. He is an Army National Guard veteran. He is the CEO of the Chamberlain Network, and he served in Iraq back in 2011. We thank you, as always, for your service, Chris, both to our nation and to us, helping us to understand a bit more about the contours of this. We heard Rafa mention Kash Patel, the FBI director, talking about training and experience. And so can you talk about how well these National Guard troops are prepared for some kind of ambush situation like what happened today?
Yeah, thanks for having me on again. So the National Guard is a professional force. I understand that a lot of people think that it's 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year. But the reality is that over the last 25 years, the National Guard has been really transformed into a very professional force that is now deploying at rates that are as high as it was in 2008 and 2009 during the surge in Iraq and Afghanistan. These are people who understand, what combat is, understand what training is. But the reality is they are not in combat. They have been called into DC to do a mission that many of them don't agree with, and so you see a lot of these folks. They're walking around. They look bored. They're doing kind of menial tasks, and this would come as a surprise to many members of the National Guard. I certainly wouldn't have expected it if I was on a mission like this. And so while the Guard is professional, it's horrifying that this attack happened. I'm grateful for members of law enforcement and the National Guard members who subdued the suspect. But I just want to reiterate that had this deployment not happened, the shooting wouldn't have happened. So those two things they can't be the same.
Yeah, and Chris, you mentioned this is a different type of mission. So take us to the moments before 2:15, before this ambush today. What would the day have been like for these National Guardsmen from the beginning up until this moment?
Sure. So these are folks that have set areas of patrol. They're walking around in small teams, and they get their orders from their commanding officer, and usually, while I'm not entirely privy to the West Virginia National Guard's operating standards, but there usually is some sort of threat brief if something is coming up. These are people who take their environment seriously. But the past 6 months have shown that there have really been no need for them here. So it is not surprising to me that many of these troops would have been caught off guard by what appears to be a lone wolf targeting these troops for whatever reason.
How would this kind of targeted attack impact the morale? I mean, you talked about a group of people who already don't necessarily want to be here, and they may not agree with their mission, but they do what they are told to do. How does something like this impact what happens with them tomorrow?
So there are going to be a lot of conversations in barracks and in bays and group chats and family chats. People are going to be very concerned. They're going to be on guard. They're going to be watchful. And I would just encourage citizens and civilians in the DC area to reach out to members of these National Guard and just show them how much you support them. Because what we don't want to see is members of the National Guard feel like the citizens of the District of Columbia, or Americans in general, are treating them as the enemy, because that's not the case. The members of the National Guard are not the enemy. They are doing a job that they have been assigned to do, and they're going to execute it to the best of their abilities. And morale is something that we should all take very seriously. But it's something that our fellow citizens have an impact over, and how we treat our service members who are in the streets at this moment.
Hey, Chris, have you talked to National Guardsmen who feared for their safety in terms of their mission here in the district?
So my contacts in the National Guard that have been deployed to DC have been quiet today. They're very busy, and I anticipate to have further conversations in the future about what they're feeling about. What I can say is I've had extensive conversations with many members of the National Guard over the past 6-8 months, and they never felt like they were unsafe. They felt like they were being used inappropriately, that their family members wanted them home, that they wanted to go home. But they never felt really that the public was a threat to them. And so it's really important that the public understands that these National Guard troops are their neighbors, and they want to serve the community just as much as a police officer or a firefighter or a postman. And so we should be treating them with as much respect and dignity as we give every other profession that serves their community.
Another 500 National Guardsmen are going to be on their way here to this city very soon. What lessons can we learn from what happened today?
So as I mentioned earlier, this is a pattern of escalation that this president likes to engage in whenever there is a threat, instead of responding with probably the most effective solution, which would have been, empowering local law enforcement, be it federal or DC, to do their job. Bringing in more troops is going to be seen as an escalation. And what I would encourage those troops who are coming in is to think about their mission. Their mission really is to be as respectful as possible to the members of DC, to the citizens of DC. This is not a combat zone, and while this tragic, horrific shooting has happened, we should be working together to ensure that this does not happen again. So I would encourage, that PFC that's coming in from I'm not sure where, to think about, how am I going to interact well with the members of DC, the citizens of DC, because I'm going to be around them for a long time.
Yeah, we know that the National Guard, as of late, has been politicized. Their presence has been controversial. For folks at home who are not familiar with the typical duties of the National Guard, can you tell us what a typical tour or a typical mission is like, and how long that typically lasts?
Sure. So it varies depending on the type of mission. It can vary anywhere up to a couple days if there's a snowstorm, up to a year or two in federal service. There were, in the height of the surge in Iraq and Afghanistan, there were some National Guard units that were out for 16 or 18 months. So that was a long time. Those types of tours are well in the past, thankfully. But when we talk about these domestic deployments, what we have typically seen is there is a hurricane or an earthquake, or the wildfires in California is a really good example, where you have people who are trained on a particular mission set, and they're going in to help fight the fires or fly helicopters in for relief, or put sandbags up for to prevent from flooding. Unfortunately, the members of the DC National, or members of the National Guard generally that have come to DC, are not entirely trained in law enforcement, and that's why it's so inappropriate to have them in the district. What we have seen are members of military police companies, which is a different type of policing than civilian law enforcement. Infantry companies, folks you would mostly see, in combat. And what we would really encourage is all of these troops go home. And the president should be empowering local law enforcement to do their jobs.
Well, Chris Purdy, we thank you for your service. We thank you for your insights, and we hope we can continue to lean on you for more conversations like this one as we try to understand what happened and what's next. Yeah. Chris, thank you, and happy Thanksgiving to your family too.
I'll be
Thanks so much.
brothers and sisters in the days ahead.
Absolutely.